Hello, listeners. I can't wait for you to meet today's guest, Ann Friedman. She's a former preschool music teacher who's been volunteering her whole life. You're going to love her. Ann is the executive director of Gay for Good, and we'll do a deep dive into her organization's mission during the interview, but here's what I want you to know about her right now. She lives in Southern California with her wife and cats, and she started volunteering with Gay for Good while she was still working full-time at a nonprofit foundation. However, after a tragic event, Ann found herself reevaluating her priorities, and what happened next kind of surprised everyone, even Ann. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation that I had with Ann Friedman, the executive director of Gay for Good. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. So, Ann, welcome to the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here, Laura. Very excited.
And so you and I were just talking about how we've prepared our areas and basically had to lock our pets out.
Yes, we did. I was on a call yesterday and thought I did the right thing by shutting the door and had a cat scratching on the door in the middle of a live conversation.
I can't even count the number of times I've had to get up in the middle of one of our Facebook Lives that we're doing or a Zoom or something and go let my dog out of the office and then let her back in. So we literally bought a dog door that we're going to put on an inside door in our house just so my dog can go in and out and not be scratching at the door because she can't make up her mind, you know?
Exactly. Mine's the same way. They want to be in the window. They want to be out. They want to be in. They want to be out. You can't win.
Right. You can't. And so, we just accommodate our lives to our pets and everybody's happy.
Yes.
So by this point in the podcast, I will have already given like a brief introduction to your organization, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your role and what Gay for Good does?
Absolutely. So I am the executive director of Gay for Good. We are a nonprofit that energizes and mobilizes the LGBTQ community and our allies to go out and do volunteer work. We partner with nonprofits that are typically not directly associated with the LGBTQ community as a way to engage with our neighbors, learn about the causes in our communities, and really just get out there and be a part of the greater communities where we live and work. So we have chapters that are led by volunteer leaders. We currently have chapters in 16 cities around the country.
Wow.
And to date, we've actually partnered with over 500 different nonprofits, many that we go back to time and time again. So we're very well versed in volunteering, and we serve a wide range of communities, from seniors to children, veterans, prisoners, some LGBTQ causes. And then the beautiful thing is we help all of these different organizations, but we also create a space for people who are part of the LGBTQ community to come together and make friends and network and meet new people while feeling really good about giving back.
Yeah. And so I'm really curious how you came to be part of Gay for Good. Just thinking about the name gay doesn't speak female to me. And so as a woman, like, what was your journey getting to the point that you're the executive director of Gay for Good? How did you even come in to be involved with this organization?
So I probably should back up and start with kind of my journey into just service and being attracted to the world of nonprofits. And that started when I was a child, attending City of Hope luncheons and different events with my family. And then that was something that I passed on to my children, taking them during holidays to serve meals for Thanksgiving or to organize toys for a holiday toy drive. And so service was really always a part of who I was.
So let me ask you real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to just put some geographical context to Gay for Good. Where are you located?
I live in Long Beach, California.
Okay. And is that where City of Hope is?
City of Hope is in Los Angeles.
Okay, so it's in the LA area. I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of put some geographic context to what you were talking about.
Mhm.
And so you were saying that as a child, you would go to City of Hope?
Every year, my mom would get a table and we would go sit and we would support the charity luncheon.
Okay, gotcha. And so then as you went into adulthood, you just continued doing that kind of thing?
It's something that I really wanted to instill in my children was that being of service was really important. And I wanted them to see that not everybody has all of the things that they have and the privileges that they've grown to not necessarily know are privileges.
Mhm.
So for me, it was important to make them aware that there were other people beyond the bubble that they lived in
Mhm.
and to see how other people lived and the needs of their community.
Yeah, that's so important. There's this whole movement on right now about becoming an anti-racist. And I think that that's one of the keys right there, exposure and proximity. And I think we're going to be talking about that throughout the whole podcast, just the importance of helping children understand what privilege they have, if they have it, help them
Right.
understand what privilege they have and then how to wield it for justice. So that's really great. And so, how did you end up in the sector?
So I found Gay for Good. I had come out later in life in my late 30s. And at that time, my kids at this point were grown and I was looking for things to do. And so I found myself going to meetup groups for hiking and volunteering. And as I discovered who I was inherently, probably all along, but was just figuring it out at this very late age, I was really looking for a way to connect with the queer community. And so I don't know if I Googled gay volunteering or if I stumbled on it on Facebook, but somehow I landed on this organization called Gay for Good. And I connected with their Los Angeles chapter and showed up volunteering. And I would come each month and volunteer. And within probably about 4 or 5 times, I just so happened to be working alongside one of the founders who was one of the leaders in LA who said, "Hey, would you be interested in joining our leadership team here in LA?" And so I said, "Absolutely." You asked me earlier about the name gay and the lack of female representation. And at that time, very early on, this was in 2010, the organization was only 18 months old, but they had already spread to 7 cities, but it was predominantly male in those very months. And so they saw an opportunity to really change that. And I happened to come in kind of at the ground level of really making a focused effort to make the organization more inclusive.
It's so interesting. And so they basically recruited you to be on the leadership team. And so what did that mean to be on the leadership team of Gay for Good in LA, right? It's a chapter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So it was a chapter leader. And as I mentioned earlier, each chapter is led by a team of leaders who go out and identify the nonprofits that we're going to work with. They plan all of the events. They are kind of the point person that day. They create social opportunities. And they're basically the organizers of that chapter of Gay for Good in their city. Some of our chapters have 4 to 6 leaders. Some have upwards of 12. We've even had chapters that have been led just by 2 really dedicated people. And as I mentioned, we're in 16 cities today. Right now, about 80 different people who we would call our chapter leaders.
Okay. And so how long were you in that position?
I was in that position not very long, and very quickly after taking on that position was invited to apply to be on the board of directors. So I very quickly moved from volunteer to chapter leader to board member within a very short time. I want to say it was about 5 months. And I found myself sitting on the board of the organization nationally, overseeing at that time 7 chapters.
Wow. I'd like to pause here for just a second because this is something that I've heard come up over and over again, is that the people who are volunteering, that is a really great place to find new board members. You know, people who are volunteering in your organization and who are really dedicated. It's kind of its own little mini vetting process to help you spot people who have a real interest in leadership. And just that volunteers need to be taken care of. I just wanted to hit on that for a second, because had you had a poor experience there, you would have never continued on. And here you are, the executive director now.
That's right.
So going back then, they obviously were ready to level up in a way, to diversify and to grow. And they wanted you on the board because it wasn't just the token female. You
Correct.
weren't the token female on the
No,
board.
I had some skin in the game. I had a background in doing all sorts of things. I had volunteered with them for, at that point, a lot of months. And I had proved myself as a leader, that I was doing a great job of organizing events and planning projects. And I think probably at the end of the day, what really shone through was just my passion. I really fell in love with what the organization was doing and wanted to be a part of helping scale to new cities and to provide. I wanted to have other people have this chance to experience what I experienced.
Yeah. And I just think the mission is really so important. And so how did you go from then being on the board to becoming the executive director? What happened to make that transition for you? Because not a lot of times do you find a board member who then goes on staff unless they're the founder, right? And so what was it that happened with you that made you kind of apply for that? Did they have other executive directors prior to you?
No. So when I was on the board, when I first joined the board, like I mentioned, we were in 7 cities. We added about 3 chapters and we're hovering around 10 several years later. And the reason was we had no staff. We were completely a volunteer working board. I was doing a lot of the work myself, along with some other really great board members and at that time 2 founders. But we were stuck. We couldn't keep growing without having some full-time people to really guide and lead and provide the resources and training that our leaders needed and our volunteers needed to really do a better job and be able to do more. So at that time, several years ago, I was working at a community foundation. So on the other side, we were giving money to nonprofits versus going in and serving nonprofits with our time.
Okay.
And I'd been working in that job for about 5 years, and a really tragic event happened that really made me evaluate what I wanted to be doing with my life. So I was working for a nonprofit. It was a community foundation. I loved the work that I was doing, but I was missing a connection to actually being with the nonprofits. And the chair of my board of that nonprofit, a foundation that I was working at, his son came home from college at 19 years old over winter break 2 years ago and was found stabbed 19 times and buried in a park around the corner from his house.
Oh my gosh.
And as we came to learn what the events were that day, it came to be known that it was a hate crime and that Blaze was his name, was murdered for being gay and possibly also for being Jewish.
Wow.
And it was really just this pivotal moment in my life where I couldn't believe that in Orange County, California, which although known at the time to be a little bit more red than blue for a California city, but that a kid could come home from college and that someone else could take their life simply because of who they are or what they identify as or what their religion is or who they love. And so for me personally, I just had this shift, and I'd been sitting on the board of Gay for Good. I'd been doing all of that on the sidelines very quietly, doing my board service while having my job at the foundation. And I came home from work one day about a week after this happened, and I said to my wife, I think I need to quit my job. I think Gay for Good really needs to grow. We need to be doing this in more places. More people need to know who we are as a community and meet us to really break down the stereotypes and misconceptions and fear that then can breed hate just from not knowing who somebody is.
Right. And so how did your wife react?
Well, I had always promised my wife I would not quit a job without having a job. And it was definitely, I think, a bit of a surprise. And we are by no means wealthy where I can just stop working and life goes on. But I was in a position where I knew that I had a little bit tucked away in savings, that if I was going to take this giant leap of faith, I could comfortably do it for a couple of months. And we could evaluate where we were at that point.
Okay.
So what I did was I let my employer know that I was leaving. I did give them several weeks notice, and that was very challenging. I didn't want to walk away from them.
Well,
Our board
sure.
chair had just lost his son, and I'm quitting my job at that organization. So that was a little tough, but I was very mindful of that. And I gave them several weeks notice and also offered them the opportunity that I would be more than happy 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whenever they found somebody else, that I'd be more than happy to come in and do
Sure.
any training or work that they needed, because I didn't feel right leaving them stuck while I went off to pursue this
Sure.
potentially crazy dream. So I put together a business plan and I reached out to my board and I said, look, we've been talking about hiring somebody. We'd had conversations about how are we going to start with maybe a part-time person? But the reality was we probably needed 3 full-time people out the gate. So I was pretty sure we needed at least 1 full-time. And I had, like I said earlier, I had a lot of skin in the game. I have been a part of the organization for years and I loved what we were doing. And I knew a lot of our leaders and a lot of our volunteers. And I really wanted to take it to the next level. So I put together that plan. I had a meeting with each of my board members individually. And then I did a pitch to them as a group. And I kind of put together an offer they maybe could refuse, but I put together a plan that enabled them to bring me on and take this chance for 90 days and have a conversation 90 days from then to see if our plan was working.
Okay.
So I set out to raise a very large sum of money so that I could prove that we could do this and we could take ourselves financially to the place that we could afford to hire a full-time employee. And we raised $70,000 in the first 90 days.
Wow. 70,000 in 90 days?
Yes.
Were you still working at your other job when you did that?
No, I completely separated from my job and was 100% focused on figuring out how to take this organization and start saying yes. At that time, I had done a little survey, and in the 3 years prior to that, we'd turned away 63 people who'd said, how can I do this in my city? And we were turning them away because we didn't have the resources, money, or persons to really support growing.
Right. So you get to the 90-day mark and you raised $70,000. And what was their reaction to that?
Well, I should say that this wasn't just me. I definitely had a working board. A big portion of it was me, but I definitely had some support from some of the board members who also were helping. But I think it was really an eye-opener. We had existed on anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 for almost 8 years. But as a result of that, we were not able to say yes, not able to grow. We didn't have a great website. We didn't have the insurance and all of the things that we needed. Things weren't being taken care of at that level that you really need to be at if you're really going to start organizing and mobilizing people across the United States.
Yeah, to think of the opportunity that you had to come in at that moment, not to disparage the founders, but it's almost like you're part of the founding team because you're the one that's kind of helping to take it to the next level and start the scaling. And so how long have you been in the position that you're in right now then as executive director?
So I've been in this role for just over 2 years.
Okay.
And in that 2 years, we hit our goal. We set a budget of $108,000 year 1, $120 year 2, which is about to come up in a few days here. We've met both of those goals.
Wow.
We have added 6 chapters. We've just exploded our visibility all across the country. We've added so many new leaders and so many more people are connected to our organization and following our organization and wanting to be a part of our organization. So much so that even this month, I have had so many people requesting meetings to learn how they can do this in their community that I've actually set up 2 webinars, which I've never done. Usually I just do a phone call with somebody. I have so much interest that I've actually set up information sessions where I can maximize my time and talk to 6+ people all at once.
That's really amazing. So we touched earlier on the name Gay for Good, and it sure sounds like your organization has evolved. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, the organization was started by three men. They were actually part of a hiking group that still exists today. And they realized they had so many people coming out to hike every weekend. Why not put these people to good work and start finding ways to connect with the community? And so Gay for Good was born out of that. And as I said earlier, in the early days, as it scaled to those first few cities, it definitely was people who knew them or moved. And so there were a lot of men. Mm-hmm. But at the time that I came on, they were very specifically thinking about how to be more diverse and how to reach a broader group of people across the LGBTQ spectrum. And so as we started bringing on new cities, we now are very mindful of diversity, and we won't accept a group of people who want to start a chapter if we don't see diversity within that group.
Okay.
And that's gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, age, gender expression, race, ethnicity. We want to make sure that the people leading each chapter are a reflection of the volunteers that will follow. And we've seen that there is absolutely a 100% a direct correlation between what the leaders look like and who comes out to volunteer. Mm-hmm. For example, I have a chapter that was being led by only men. We added several female leaders, and within 1 month, the people showing up for the projects flipped to almost 60% female to 40% male.
Wow.
We have trans leaders. We have leaders that identify as non-binary. We have leaders that are people of color. That's what we want. We want to see everyone feeling welcomed. And we do recognize as an organization that some people use gay as an umbrella term, mm-hmm. and other people don't. And there are people who do immediately associate it with male. And so we've had to really take a hard look at that and look at our marketing and the images that we're projecting and the taglines, and making sure we say LGBTQ and a plus and allies and friends, because we do want to be welcoming of all people.
Yeah. And I think that it's just such an important mission. And I'm really curious, Anne. So can you give me kind of a rundown of what it would be like to go to a Gay for Good service project, or like how often do you do it? And maybe just give me an example of one of the projects that you've done.
Sure. I can tell you about one of my favorite projects. I don't get to volunteer as much anymore because I'm sitting in an office running things.
Right.
But as often as I can, I go out and volunteer. So you asked me how often we have projects. Typically, a chapter does at least one project a month.
Okay.
And we have chapters where 10 or 15 people will come out, or you might have 100 people come out for a project. It just depends.
Wow.
Every community is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that's beautiful about our organization is we have certain things that are the same across all of the chapters, that we try to carry out our mission in the same way, but we also recognize that every community is different. So we do have certain ways that we allow a group to meet the needs of their community, and that might be unique and not the same. So it's not a one size fits all. But typically what people do, they find us online, they find us on social media, and they sign up to be quote unquote a volunteer or a member. Those words get used interchangeably, although there's no fee. And they'll get an email about once a month saying, this is what we're going to be doing. And it might be an environmental project. We might be working with animals or working at a food bank or any other nonprofit that needs help. We do a lot of run walk support. And so volunteers can come every month. They can come once a year. They can come as often as they want. But what a typical project looks like, and I'll tell you about one of my favorites, is we volunteered at an animal shelter in Long Beach, here where I live. And it was a small animal shelter, not one with a big name. And they had about 35 small dogs that were living in the shelter, and they needed to clean the facility. And you can't come in and power wash and clean with the animals in the shelter.
Right.
And so Gay for Good brought 40 plus volunteers that took the dogs out on donated leashes to the park. The majority of the volunteers took them for a 2-hour play date at the park, while we had a team of people stay back and pressure wash and clean the entire facility. And as each dog came back, we also got to bathe them and put them back in their now clean home. So that's a really good example of impact, where we can really make a difference for a really small nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
But then another example would be projects that I love that really get to the heart of what our mission is, which is visibility and interacting with our neighbors. So the project I just described, it was just us. So we had some interaction with the staff, and we had some interaction with people who saw us out on the street. We all wear name tags that say Gay for Good or hats or t-shirts. But the really beautiful projects are ones like we go to the Operation Gratitude Armory and we walk through those doors with our name tags and our signs that say Gay for Good. And we're working alongside 500 or 600 other people from different groups. So churches and schools and key clubs and all kinds of different groups that are coming together for the same mission to package care packages to be sent off to first responders and military troops. And you're walking up and down these aisles, talking with each other and having banter and really getting to interact with the people in the community. So those projects are really what it's all about. I have been in projects like that where there's eye rolling or who's this organization? Oh, they're gay. And by the end, you've got people, when can we volunteer with you again? How can we come? Do you let everybody volunteer with you? I'm an ally, or they may not have been an ally, but now they are. So many examples of really, truly changing hearts and minds by doing the boots on the ground work. There's a lot of really amazing organizations that are fighting for LGBTQ rights and equality, and organizations like GLAAD who are really focused on making sure there's positive representation in the media. And we have organizations like HRC that are making sure that we have the right people in office and policies that are supporting our human rights. But we take this very boots on the ground, walking out into the street and shaking hands with our neighbors, meeting our neighbors. We are here. We are part of this community. We are no different. And I really think that it's a powerful thing to have that face-to-face interaction.
Absolutely. I don't think that anything substitutes for proximity and relationship and getting out there, no pun intended. Getting out there and just being with the community, doing important work together. Like you said, the visibility, and it's not just the visibility as much as it is the interaction. I guess what I want to say is I'm just thinking out loud here, but one of the things that I have felt is very important about the way that we interact inside the lab. So, we have the nonprofit leadership lab and we're all remote. So we couldn't get together and volunteer something like this for people to get to know us. And so the way that we do it is we'll do orientation where we'll have a whole bunch of us on screen at the same time. And there's something about, yes, they're getting to know me, but then they're also getting to know Joan or Noelani or Scott. But when they see us all together interacting with each other, and then interacting with the members, it it makes it more real, maybe, that we're not just these faces on a screen and you're kind of doing the same thing, only in person at all these different chapters all over the United States and hopefully internationally, right? At some point as you scale.
We'll see. We do have an organization that grew out of our organization that's in the UK. They had come to us, but we weren't in a position to really start figuring out how to operate outside of the United States. We figured we better get good at what we're doing here before we go to that place. But the other thing that's to make a connection to what you're doing in the nonprofit leadership lab, it's a place for people to come together and connect.
Right.
And so Gay for Good is that for a lot of people. The LGBTQ community tends to either live in silos, all kind of in the same affirming areas because they feel comfortable. Or for a lot of people, they're very isolated and they're alone. And we provide this place where you can come and meet like-minded, nice people. It's not a bar. It doesn't cost money. It's just it feels good to volunteer. And so we provide this kind of community within our organization for a lot of people. And I've seen friendships grow. I see people who drive hours, which tells me there's a real need for what we're doing. If that person's willing to get in their car and drive 2 hours to come volunteer with us once a month, they're clearly looking for that connection and they're getting it when they show up with us.
Right. And so you have your community and your people are building relationships with each other. And then they go out and they're volunteering. And it's not just that they're coming in, nose to the grindstone, doing the work and leaving. It's their interaction with each other. And then that branches out into interacting with the other volunteers or the community members that are there. And it's like the sum is greater than the parts.
Mm-hmm.
The sum of the whole, whatever that saying is, but it's like the synergy that happens when you bring all these people together. I mean, I guess it just makes sense because, it's outreach to help educate the community. And I just love the mission because I think so many people, which I do think the number is decreasing. I have so much hope in the next generations that are coming up because there's been so much more visibility and positive media and legislation, affirming legislation and allyship, that the younger generation just is not having the, I don't know what you want to call it, reaction to the gay community that the older generations have had. And yet, we have this story that you said that was just 2 years ago with the board director's son being murdered. And so there's still a lot of work to do.
There's still a lot of work to do. I think even if we were to get to this beautiful place where we were treated equally and represented equally, people always need a sense of community. That's not going to stop. People need to find connection with each other. And nonprofits at the end of the day need help. And so when we go in, it's a lot of layers of goodness. When we go in, yes, we're out there as really positive role models for LGBTQ people and the younger generation. And yes, we're creating this community for our people. And yes, we've done some really great tasks for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday or Sunday. But the other thing that we do is provide visibility for that nonprofit. Maybe we can only have 25 people come out on any given Saturday, but we've just sent an email to 3,000 people for that chapter's mailing list or pushed it out on social media where 5,000 eyes could see it. So the nonprofits benefit far beyond the moment that we're there. So there's just all these different layers of what we do and how it's helpful and how it's good and how we're making a difference for our communities, for our neighbors, for people that are like us, people that are not like us, for the nonprofits.
Right. I just think it's so important. And I think one of the things that I've been trying to bring out in every episode this month, with it being Pride Month, is that you're not on some secret hidden agenda to convert everybody to being gay. That's not what this is about. It's about sharing the common humanity that we all have together in healthy relationships and trying to destigmatize and get rid of the stereotypes and just let people live their lives and build the community and build the healthy relationships with each other. And I just think that's so important. It's such an important mission to get out there and to let people see your normalcy.
Yeah, we're the same. We are productive members of society. We have jobs. We have families.
Right.
We're no different. At the end of the day, we have similar struggles and similar wins, and we're all just humans. We're all just people.
Right.
And so you would hope that we would live in a world where you didn't need a nonprofit to prove that.
Right.
But we've made a lot of progress, but there's still so much work to do.
Sure.
And I, for one, like I said, just this past week, having seen in the month of June, I don't know if it's Pride or some other partnerships that we have going on, but to have dozens of people reaching out saying, how can I do this in my community? Tells me we're doing something right. Or there's a need for what we're doing, whether that need is helping others and just being in the spirit of volunteerism, which makes people feel great, or whether it's about finding connection, or whether it is about that, the visibility and the uniting people and the really wanting to fight to break down those barriers. Whatever it is, it's important.
We're in a moment right now, and I think a lot of people are reconsidering their values. There's a lot of education going on, not just with racism, but just understanding what it means to be a human and the potential of community coming together around a cause has been just really incredible, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And so let me ask you a couple more quick questions because I know we need to wrap up, but I'm really curious, how are you doing something like this, you're volunteering in the middle of a pandemic?
That's a great question, Laura. So, in the very early days when COVID first became very widely understood to be dangerous, we put a complete halt or put a pause on all in person events.
Okay.
And that was really because we wanted to ensure the safety of our volunteers and our leaders.
Sure.
And there was a lot of unknowns. At the same time, many of the nonprofits were also canceling events on us. And they were saying, we are not equipped to handle volunteers. We don't want to put people at risk. We're going to use staff. We've got, in some cases, even like I think National Guard came in to help certain charities.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put a pause on it and we immediately started thinking about what can we do while we're at home to help others. And so we quickly pivoted and we did things like writing cards to isolated LGBTQ seniors. We did a letter writing campaign for first responders and healthcare workers. We did a drive-through food drive with one of our cities where people could safely drive up with a mask and drop off food that went to another foundation, another charitable organization. One of our chapters just finished reviewing scholarships for a Cesar Chavez committee in their town. So we found ways that we could provide some service and do some things to help our communities, but at the same time recognizing that as we stopped volunteering, the needs for volunteers actually grew. There's more people needing food, more people needing help right now than ever before, with people out of jobs, people being isolated, people who are elderly not being able to leave their homes. And so we now that we're about 12 weeks plus into the pandemic, we have seen that our nonprofits have it figured out. They have implemented social distancing or physical distancing. They are requiring masks. They have the hand sanitizer. They're able to serve their community safely. And so I'm really excited that we have actually started to go back out and volunteer again. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, we had a team of a very small group of volunteers go out and socialize bunnies at an animal shelter. And we had volunteers in Los Angeles go to 3 different LAUSD schools and pass out foods with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank. We had our group in DC was cleaning up a local park, being able to do it safely. So we're really excited. But we also are mindful that there's still a lot of unknowns and we want to make sure our volunteers are safe. And the people who lead our chapters are volunteers. So we have not put any pressure on them to have to go out and plan projects. That's a very personal choice. And we want to be mindful and respectful. But I have seen in the cities where we have started to promote events, they fill up within minutes. People are really eager to get back out.
Yeah. And just get out there and help. I love your mission so much. And the fact that you're just taking your time, making sure everybody's safe, that you never really stopped. And that's been one of the most inspiring things. I think we have to have those things that we latch onto when we're going through this collective grief. And to know that the nonprofit sector has really just shown through this whole thing, because it's like, okay, what does this make possible now? Because we can't do it the way we've been doing it. So what does this make possible? What can we now do? And now that you've done all this virtual stuff, it's great that you're back out there, but I bet there's going to be a whole new category of volunteering now that people want to do, but maybe they can't come in person. And so now you have this whole other area that you didn't have before.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Laura. So one of the beautiful things about doing things virtually, and although it wasn't as much as we would like to have done, it wasn't to the level that we were engaging people pre-COVID, but what we've learned is that we can reach more people. Like you said, we can get people in communities where we don't exist. I did a virtual Zoom workshop with another organization with kids and families, and we were making pop-up cards and they mailed them all to us to send through our letter writing campaign. And so we were able to work with this other organization that we'd never touched before and a community of an age range we'd never touched before. So we've really been able to evolve and still get our message out there and still find ways to connect, even if it's from our own living rooms, our offices.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. And it's so inspiring to hear the stories of what organizations have done. Like you said, how did you pivot and what of the pivoting are you keeping? It's just this time of reinventing. I don't know, this is probably a horrible example, but I just think of the movie X-Men. I happen to love the X-Men series movies. It has nothing to do with the fact that Hugh Jackman is in them. Nothing at all. It has nothing to do with the tight white t-shirt and the 501s at all. Nothing. I love the X-Men movies, and their whole intro is that at some point, and it's science fiction, but there comes a point where, in their terms, evolution takes a quantum leap forward. And I've had that thought in the back of my head because that's kind of what this time feels like to me as we're going through this crisis, this double pandemic, right? Or triple, politics, people, and pandemic. There's a lot going on. And it feels like it's this evolution almost of everything. Everything's evolving right now. And a lot of the old is being let go and a lot of the new is being embraced. We're never going back to what life was like pre-COVID. We can't because everything's changing. And so it's really such an interesting time to be alive and to witness this and to be part of basically what do we want the future to look like? Let's make that happen.
Absolutely. I think that despite some of the really big losses that have come, there's been a lot of loss of life and people's jobs, businesses, and a lot of things have happened over the past couple of months and especially the past couple of weeks. But you see these glimmers of good and you see that we can carry on and we can be successful and we can continue to operate our nonprofits and we can pivot and it's working. And it's not to say that it's easy as nonprofit leaders. I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone in having to cancel our biggest fundraiser of the year and launching into Pride Month and another Black person loses their life. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel right to be pushing out messages with rainbows and flags and rah, rah, rah. It just doesn't feel okay to do that. And so you have to make these really tough choices in moments like this. But what I've seen is people really rise to the occasion and really take a step back and figure out what's really important for the long run of our organizations.
Right. It's a clarifying moment for sure. And so I'm positive that as people listen to this, it's going to pique interest in your organization and maybe some desire to volunteer or maybe even start another chapter somewhere. And so what is the best way for people to learn more about your organization and get in touch with you guys?
So the best way is on our website, which is gayforgood.org, spelled out GAYFORGOOD.org, or finding us on social media. If you search at Gay for Good, again, spelled out, on Facebook. Okay. If you are in Boston or Chicago, New York, DC, Twin Cities, several of the cities we're in, you can Google those as well and you'll find your local chapter. But all of that information can be found on our website, as well as contact information. If you just hit the contact us button, I will get an email to my inbox as the only employee, and you will get an email back from me. Or you just directly email info@gayforgood.org. And we'd love to meet you. We'd love to tell you more about our work. And everyone is always welcome to come volunteer with us.
Well, I love that. Thank you. And one more question that I have real quick before we end, and that's just because I don't think we ever talked about it. What if I'm a nonprofit that needs volunteers? What do I do?
So if you're a nonprofit looking for volunteers, you would contact us the same as any other person. You could reach out to info@gayforgood.org, and then I could answer a few questions first and then put you in touch with the local leadership in your city where we are. I do recommend we mobilize groups of volunteers. So that's one thing very much keep in mind. We don't push out messages about one-off needs or ongoing commitments that a lot of nonprofits have. But if you need 25 people to come and pack meals, or you need somebody to come paint your offices or set up your gala or your run walk, those are the types of events we do. So I would absolutely encourage you to reach out.
Okay.
And we are always looking to partner with new organizations.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Anne. It's just been an honor to learn more about you and about the work that Gay for Good is doing. I am a huge fan of your mission and your organization. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Laura. I've just so enjoyed getting to know you and everybody through the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. And now this opportunity to be on your podcast today. We really appreciate having the space to talk about the work we do and me personally being able to share my story. I really value this opportunity and appreciate all that you do to amplify our voices.
Well, thank you. It's my honor. I promise you that. So I will go ahead and sign off and say I will see you in the village.
Sounds great. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.